Yep.
Okay.
It's all perfect.
All right.
So I do have to warn you. I can't completely ambush you. It wouldn't be fair.
Uh-oh.
So
Somebody's been talking.
yeah, I did hit up Kenton and Jim. Said, give me a primer, give me a rundown. And Jim's rundown went long enough that I didn't even have to put the kids to bed last night.
Yeah. Rivers, I listened to River, most of it. I think I got another 15, 20 minutes maybe this morning. So.
Yeah, River was hanging out with Jim when I called. Well, yeah, when Jim called me, whatever it was, River was in the background. That's a fun pair.
Yeah.
Man, I hope me and my kids get along like that.
Yeah. They're good people.
So much the same and so different too.
Yeah, they I think are probably more alike than either one of them would like to admit.
Right. That's a perfect way of putting it. Well, we'll go ahead and get started.
Okay.
Some of that's going to be B-roll, I think. Do you prefer Colonel Flatten? Mike
Mike is
Flatten?
fine. Yeah,
Right.
Mike is fine. Um, that's easiest for everybody. So for the last 25 years, in the community that I've spent the last 25 years in, we don't have call signs like pilots do. We just use initials. And it's usually either the first and last letter of your last name or the first letter of your first name, first letter of your last name. So I have been Foxtrot November FN for the last 25 years. And it is that thing is dead and gone since I retired, and it is I'm Mike will be perfect. Colonel Flatten is who I used to be. It's something that I did. It's not who I am. So
are you disappointed or relieved that they didn't go with MF?
I had a choice when I got to my first unit. And when I got my first team, they said, okay, you can either be FN or MF. And I was like, oh, I'll be FN.
Okay. a good professional decision at the very beginning. Very good.
Yes. I could see where that was going. And so, yeah.
And so obviously, to everybody who's watching, clearly it looks a lot like this is the first time we've actually talked, which it is. Now, we have communicated over Facebook, and I don't know if I told you the whole backstory of how we got connected, but for everybody else, the stage was set, I think like 2008, 2009, maybe 2010, where the Reds, they were smarter than we were. We weren't necessarily as much fun, but the Reds recognized that, hey, listen, we got people removing themselves from society to come out every night during a very fun period of college and remove themselves into the darkness to build bonfires. So let's inject a little something interesting. And so they came up with these irregular, maybe a couple, maybe 3 a year theme nights where there would be some kind of something different at Stack. There was American Night, red, white, and blue, patriotic music, hot dogs and Cracker Jack in the Cookie Shack. Thanksgiving, Halloween, Christmas. And one of the things they did was L Stack, which was Stack with a Latin flair. And a few years ago, I told them when they were trying to plan their theme nights, I said, hey, y'all, if you do a German stack, we'll call it Der Stack. If you do German stack, I will provide the bratwurst and the playlist. And I was surprised they jumped on it. And like a lot of my good ideas, they would have been great ideas 2 weeks before, but it was like the day before I messaged German clubs and said, hey, it'd be cool if on German stack night they got a message from Germany. And you replied back from Ramstein Air Force Base as the admin. So I didn't even know who you were. And you didn't make it about you. You didn't say, here's my name and who I am. You provide a little context. I was a Redpot in the 90s, and here's the message. Kept it all about the students, which I respected. But I did get in touch with Jim and say, hey, who fits this description in this location? And he immediately said, Colonel Mike Flatten. Now, what you might not know is I took your message, and when I delivered it to everybody, I got the message on the way to stack. And when I delivered it to everybody, I had translated it in German. So they all they're cornered on the North Quadrant. And I give them this message, which honestly was probably a bad translation, but it sounded good. And when I give them this translation, I don't think there was a single person there who knew a word that I was saying, but everybody there knew exactly what you were saying. I mean, it's a minor miracle they didn't light it that night. It was intense. It was a great night. So that's how we got introduced. And ever since then, most of our conversation has been around scheduling this. So
yeah. It's been a long time coming.
Yeah. Now, what were you doing in Ramstein Air Force Base a few years
ago? So we got out here in July 2020, so right in the middle of the COVID era. So we've been here about 3 years. So, I mean, the long and the short of it is, my last job was in San Antonio, excuse me. And I was about ready to be done. My wife and I met in 16, so very late. I mean, I was already a colonel, and I said, hey, I'm ready to retire. And my wife said, no, I want to go to Europe, because we had done a trip over here for my work, and I had brought my wife and kids with me, and they loved it. So I had a chip to play with someone who had some pull in the Air Force, and he asked me what I wanted to do for my last job, and I said Germany. And he's like, okay, well, there's a lot there. What do you want? I said, I don't care. If it's in Berlin in the embassy, if it's at the Marshall School, if it's in one of the NATO garrisons like Oberammergau or Geilenkirchen, or hey, you want to send me to be an Air Force LNO to an Army unit in Wiesbaden, Ramstein works. I don't care. Germany, sir, we want to go to Germany. And I said, hey, I will take any captain's job or better in Germany. And he said, well, that's a pretty low bar. And I said, well, sir, he was a 4-star. I said, well, sir, you ought to be able to get over it. Coincidentally, he has 2 daughters who are Aggies. So yeah, he made it happen. So I came out here, and we, in the military, we do exercises to practice all kinds of different things. So I came out here to run the division and the headquarters staff for the Air Force in Europe. We also are the Air Force headquarters for Africa. And I had oversight over all the exercises. So from really big exercises. And so that's what I did for the last 3 years of my military career, and then retired. 31 March was my last day in uniform. 1 April is my first day of retirement. And then on the 10th of April, I started as a contractor as an exercise planner. So it's what I've done for the last 3 years. It's what I'm doing now. I think we'll probably plan on staying out here for 2 or 3 years, and then we'll head back home to Texas.
Yeah. Yeah, my grandpa was a non-com in Wiesbaden.
Okay.
And he never left. I mean, he came back to Texas and Houston and everything. He never left. You can't leave Germany.
We're about an hour, 15 minutes, hour and 20 minutes from Wiesbaden, maybe from where we are, because we're actually about 25 minutes south of base. We're way away, like from where I'm sitting right now. I can see France.
Oh wow!
I mean, we're way far. We're pretty far south. We're just north of Pirmasens, which is kind of really the biggest city to where we live. And it's pretty awesome. I'm not gonna lie to you. We really enjoy it. Our neighbor or our landlord is a farmer. He's got a pretty big operation. My kids call his parents Oma and Opa Weber. They love That's our awesome. Kids. They give them candy all the time. The food is great. In the small towns, I mean, there's more cows and horses in our village than there are people.
Wow.
I worry about the horse manure in the street and my kids like throwing it at each other or riding their bikes through it more than I worry about traffic.
Yeah.
So
That's outstanding.
It's pretty awesome. I'm a hunter. I've got my Jagdschein, my German hunter's license, and my hunting lease is all the land around our village. So I can walk to go hunt. Yeah.
That's outstanding.
So man, it's pretty amazing. It's a great place. We really enjoy it here.
Or to put it more correctly, ganz ausgezeichnet.
Yeah, sprechen Sie bisschen Deutsch. So I'll catch some of what you're doing. I'm getting better, but I think my kids. We have a German tutor for our kids, and they probably speak better German than me at this point, which isn't hard. Again, that's a low bar, speaking better German than me. So, but my wife's family is originally from Alsace, so just across the border in France.
All right.
Alsatian, the language is about 80% German. So she grew up being around Alsatian. So she's got a little bit of German. My granddad spoke pretty good German. So I've kind of been around it, but I took a lot of Spanish, and then at A&M I took Russian. And
oh, really?
Yeah. So working on getting my German better. But
I found German helped me. I mean, I grew up with it in the background all the time. And when I took it and finally learned it, it really helped me. It made my English so much better.
Yeah.
Just the way they structure the sentences so that you don't even know what the sentence is until the very end. That was interesting. I loved it. But you took Russian at A&M. Was there an intent to that? Was there some purpose to that?
I always knew I wanted to go in the military and pursue a military career. So I did, thinking, at the time, I mean, before the Berlin Wall fell, I mean, the Soviets are the enemy, so I might as well, like, at some point this may come back to help me. Probably like a number of other classes that I took at A&M. I did not. I applied myself into a lot of other things. So my Russian was decent when I graduated. I mean, I minored in it, but it atrophied really fast. But it was all in the intent. I didn't know what I wanted to do in the military. I wanted to go in, and I figured, having a background with Russian might be beneficial to me. So that was the intent. And as a liberal arts major, I started off in engineering, Uh, I did about 2 years of mech, and I'd had enough, and I went to history, and in liberal arts you had to have you had to take X number of language classes, and then when I sat down with my academic advisor, he was like, "Hey, between your Russian history classes and if you take Russian literature and Russian language, you can get through your minor requirements pretty quickly." Because I had lost some time being in mechanical engineering, so uh, that was a much lesser thought process than I'm going to try to go in the military when I graduate. So Russian seemed like a pretty good thing.
Do you know the branch of the military? Were you Air Force all the way?
So I kind of wasn't really decided until probably my junior year. My dad was a career Air Force officer. My granddad had been in the Army, and then the Army Air Corps, and then the Air Force. I had an uncle who was in the Air Force. I had a cousin who went in the Navy, and I knew the Air Force. That's what I grew up with, and but um, the normal Air Force career wasn't. I didn't want to be a pilot. That really wasn't that interesting to me. I enjoy flying, but I didn't want to. I didn't want to be a pilot. So I was looking for something that was a lot more uh, tangible and something. Hey, if I'm going to go in the military and serve, then I want to be. If something kicks off, I want to be part of it. Fortunately for me, one of my classmates, Mike Martin, who's now a 2-star, he had gone to do a summer program with the Air Force, and he came back and said, "Hey, there's this thing called combat control, and it is what we have been looking for." And I was like, "Great, I don't know anything about it." So we, in the pre-interweb Google days, it was hard to find information about it, but we kind of slowly built up an understanding of what it was, and we both pursued that, both applied, both got selected. So he is still, as a matter of fact, he has a command in Korea. He'll be giving up command in a couple weeks, and then going to Tampa. So he is, but we're both did combat control, which became special tactics, which then became Air Force special warfare. And that's what it was. It was small units. It was very much more like being in Army Special Operations or Naval Special Warfare or Marine Special Operations of, um, you know, highly trained, very well equipped, very extremely competent, confident leadership, and very much more involved in. I mean, what we did was essentially tie the air and the ground together. So that's it was kind of right up the alley of what both of us were looking for, and fortunately for us, we both got selected out of the same selection, actually. So
now, was it a seamless selection process for you, or was there curveballs in getting there?
Oh, there was a lot of curveballs. So when Mike Martin and I got commissioned, because we both commissioned in December, so we did a 4.5 years, so we could get an extra football season in.
Smart.
Which, we knew we weren't going to see those ticket prices again anytime soon, so you might as well get it in while you have a chance. So for about 2 years, they didn't have an officer selection at all. So Mike went to selection first. He didn't get selected. I went to the next selection. I didn't get selected. And we both ended up taking a little bit of time off. We were both had both overtrained, and we were both hurt when we went to selection. We went back to the same selection, and we both ended up getting selected out of that selection. And then it was a 2-year pipeline. Once you started the pipeline, it was about 2 years to get through it. It took us both a little bit longer than that. Sometimes classes just didn't line up, and you just had downtime. So, but it was not easy. I actually I had a bad knee injury when I was 10 growing up. Almost cut my leg off with a lawnmower at the knee on the right leg. And so at selection, they said, hey, we would love to take you, but with your knee injury, this is a really hard career field physically. And we just don't think you're going to make it. And fortunately for me, one of the guys who wrote me a letter of recommendation, who ended up later being the Chief of Staff of the Air Force, General Nordy Schwartz. When I didn't get selected, he called me when I got back to my duty station. I was stationed in Hawaii at the time, and that's where he was. And he said, "Hey, what happened?" And I told him, I said that they just didn't think my knee would hold out physically. He called the group commander at the time and said, "Hey, if you don't like Flatten because you have too many blonde-haired, blue-eyed guys, or you have too many Texas A&M graduates, or whatever, pick a reason. That's fine. I will tell them right now, press on with your Air Force career. But if the only reason you didn't take him is because of his knee, the Air Force cleared him." And so there was a discussion between the group commander, who was a colonel at the time, and General Schwartz. And the next day they called me and said, "Hey, do you still want to be a combat controller? When can you show up?" So, it was a little bit of, that was a little bit of a rocky start. There was a medical officer in Air Education and Training Command who did not think I should be in that career field. He medically eliminated me from the pipeline multiple times. And then I had to, go back to, here's my approved waiver, or here's my approved physical. Here, like, I've already passed all the hardest classes. Indoc, the indoctrination course down in San Antonio, 80-something, 85% washout rate. Passed that first time, went to scuba school, was on swim team number 1, passed first time. I made it through all the schools, and eventually got reinstated. I lost a little bit of time there, and then after that, it was once I graduated, it was all good. And my knee never caused me a problem at all through my career. I was jumping until I guess I did my last jump in September of last year. I still run. I still lift reasonably heavy, I guess, for a 180-pound 53-year-old. It was never a problem, but it was rocky at the start of just getting people, hey, let me do this. You guys have already cleared me. Just leave me alone. It all worked out. All worked out.
Well, one of the little birdies I alluded to earlier, they suggested as well that Sergeant Major Thomas
yes,
applied his unique touch.
He on to this day, Sergeant Major Thomas, God rest his soul, applies his unique touch. I don't know what he saw in me or why we hit it off so well, but he was a lifelong mentor to me. There were multiple times when things happened involving, the Corps or Bonfire, and for whatever reason, my name got associated with it, and Sergeant Major would help take care of things. So oddly enough, most of the time I didn't have anything to do with it. It was somebody else, but
always, yeah.
I didn't always do as well academically as I should have. He engaged a number of times to help me, help keep me in ROTC, help keep me in university. And he was always checking in on me. As a retired sergeant major in the infantry, it wasn't hard for him to reach out to people and go, "Hey, there's a guy Flatten coming to your school," or "Hey, there's this. Hey, watch out for him. Take care of him." His mostly gentle hand, not always, but mostly gentle hand, guiding me through my career, was it was a constant presence. And whenever I had struggles with do I want to stay in, do I want to get out, what do I want to do next, he was always a guy that made himself available to me, regardless of the time, regardless of what he had going on in his life, regardless of his battle with cancer, to take the time to listen to what I was thinking and kind of talk through options and give me, grandfatherly like advice. And so, we were out here when we knew he was, not long for this world. My wife's, my father-in-law's dad was also not long for this world. My wife's granddad passed away first, and we were on our way back to go to that when found out that Sergeant Major had passed. I went to Sergeant Major's funeral, and my wife and kids went to my wife's grandfather's funeral, and I was, that was a blessing to be able, to be in the right place at the right time, to be able to, on fairly short notice, change course and make sure my wife and kids were good and that they had everything they needed to go to my wife's grandfather's funeral, and that my wife is a saint and said, "No, you go to Sergeant Major's because that's where you need to be." Right. As it turns out, my wife has known Sergeant Major Thomas nearly as long as I have.
Really?
So, my wife's grandmother and grandfather. So grandfather was an Aggie, played on the baseball team, was an All-American pitcher. Was a pitcher for the first A&M team to go to College World Series. But all of my wife's uncles went to A&M. They were all in F2, and they all knew Sergeant Major Thomas. My mother-in-law, or my grandmother-in-law, who my daughter is named after, invited Sergeant Major Thomas out to their house in South Texas all the time. He used to go hunting with my wife's granddad. And so when my wife and I started dating, Sergeant Major called me and he said, "Hey, what are you doing?" I'm in San Antonio for an investigation. No, are you dating Rhea Hogue? Yes. Hey man, you better be serious about this. And I was like, how do you know this? Like, who's telling you this? And he's like, hey, I know, I have known her since she was like 5 or 6 years old.
Oh, damn.
And I was like, oh. He goes, yeah, I talk to her family all the time. So it was even then Sergeant Major was like, hey, you have found one in a billion. Don't screw this up, Flatten. And he was right. They just pulled up, so it may get loud here in a minute.
Well,
yeah, but Sergeant Major. So I'm trying to convince my wife. So we're having a boy in October, and I'm trying. I think I got her about halfway there to name him George Thomas Flatten.
Oh man.
Yeah. So still working on her, but she hasn't come back with any counter proposals yet. So,
but that's take a good one.
Yeah. Yeah. She just doesn't want anybody to call him Georgie. And I was like, okay, that's fine. Like, we can call him Thomas. We can call him Tommy. We can call him GT.
Yeah.
Hell, we can call him Sergeant Major. But that's kind of where I'm hoping to lead that conversation. And that's what Sergeant Major needs to be.
What exactly was his
son? Yeah, go ahead.
No, continue.
My oldest son is named after me, but we call him Jack, which is my granddad's name. Mm-hmm. My daughter is named after Rhea's grandmother, and then our current youngest son is named after her grandfather. And those are all tremendously important people in our lives, and that's the level where I hold Sergeant Major Thomas.
Yeah. Yeah. It almost seems like destiny keeps putting him in that position. What exactly was his role at A&M when y'all crossed paths?
So he was one of our advisors. I think he was the actual advisor to the Bonfire Committee. Mm-hmm. Bill Kibler did that, but I think Bill Kibler was just the administration guy who was in charge of was supposed to have oversight of Bonfire. Mm-hmm. Whereas Sergeant Major Thomas was, and he was engaged with us, the juniors and seniors, the Browns, the climbers, on Bonfire, and being a mentor and an advisor to us. His full-time job was he was core housing. I don't remember if he was the director of core housing. He might have been. He was an incredibly experienced sergeant major when he retired from the Army. And so for him to run core housing would have taken about one pinky's worth of his capability.
Right.
So it wouldn't have been probably an overly taxing job for him, which gave him time to mess with knuckleheads like me.
Right. Yeah, and when you say for everybody else, when you say us and our, and you're talking about the leadership of Aggie Bonfire, which he's I became aware of him years ago through Joey Dollins.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of this line of questioning is just me personally, curiously, because whenever I'm trying to sound out some kind of, all right, here's the challenge. I'm thinking I might kind of help them in this direction or whatever. I, it's deads. It's, former leaders that are my sounding board a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And Joey almost always references the sergeant major and goes,
Yeah.
well, this seems similar to whatever. And this is how the sergeant major dealt with it. So,
Right.
It's it's different. It's different settings and perhaps scale, but then the scale of some of the things are bigger now, and there's this overlap that I know. That's the challenge. Core housing is not the challenge.
No.
The challenge is dealing with people who were in the position you were in.
Right.
And helping.
And it's amazing because if you talk to the bonfire committee folks and he probably had maybe 3 or 4 guys out of every class that he was kind of closer to. But if you go talk to the Ross Volunteer Company guys, because he used to be the advisor for the Ross Volunteer Company, and if you go talk to the leadership of the Ross Volunteer Company from the times when they would tell you, oh yeah, he gave us all of his time, right? The bonfire committee guys are like, no. He gave us all of his time. He did stuff with core leadership. He did stuff with the band. He did stuff with yell leaders. He did stuff with the CAV. He did stuff. He had an innate ability to put his time and effort in the places where it was going to matter most, and to really identify, hey, this group of people needs my help right now, so I'm going to go help them. I'm going to keep all of these other people that I deal with, kind of on the back burner. But he was, and that's just what I learned over the years is really good sergeants major. That's what they do. Right? They're identifying leaders. Doesn't matter leaders of what, just leaders, or people who have the potential to be leaders, and they cultivate it, and they challenge them, and they mentor them, and they go, okay, I know what you were trying to do, but did you consider these other things? Oh, no, Sergeant Major. Okay, hey, let's walk through this decision making process, and I'll show you some places where you can do better. Or how do you look around corners to see what's coming next? And he was exceptionally gifted at doing that. And man, I would tell you that even amongst my class members, I would have told you, yeah, man, he probably never talked to anybody else in my class. It's not true. I know it's not true. But the way his relationship with me and the way he treated me, he made you feel like, hey, you were the most important person in the world, and at that second in time, you were, because he focused everything on you. But man, you didn't walk away going, yeah, that guy's just blowing smoke. Man, that guy's he's just telling me what I want to hear. Because, and he would tell you what you needed to hear, whether you wanted to hear it or not. And he would pull you aside in a grandfatherly way and smack you in the back of the head and go, hey, look, you idiot, like what you're doing isn't working. Let's figure out a better way. And it's amazing as you talk to people who knew him, how all of them feel that way. I mean, Joey Dollins, I know he had a great relationship with Joey. And Joey would probably tell you that, hey, when I dealt with Sergeant Major Thomas, I felt like he was my personal life coach. And at the same time, because Joey was one of my dads, I felt like Sergeant Major was my life coach. And it was he was an amazing man. We're like, I don't think necessarily the Corps or the university has done enough to recognize the amount of impact that he had on those students, core or not, who interacted with him while he was working for the university.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's it's an art, right? And
it is.
the and the compartmentalization and the insulation of others concerns from each other. I mean, that's exceptionally hard. That part of you wants to say, listen, I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to give you everything you need right now because I've got these other things. I don't want you to feel like you're not important to me, but I've got these other things. Well, then you put in somebody's head that they're not the center of the universe and that they can't come to you at any time. And that's not helpful. And so you have to do this thing where you go, all right, I'm not going to make excuses and I'm just going to deliver on what they need every time. So where were we?
Sergeant Major. We were finishing up talking about Sergeant Major, I think.
Sergeant Major. So one thing that I did hear, River told me that he had a conversation with the Sergeant Major last year, a couple years ago. It would be shortly before he passed. And the Sergeant Major said that in one of his conversations where he was, talking to somebody about your career objectives, he described that if you were able to do the job you did as a student, you were a shock pot, correct?
Right. Yep.
Redpot shock pot. If you were able to do what you did as a student, then you could do what you wanted to do in the Air Force on one leg. Would you consider that a fair assessment?
So
in spirit, at least.
How do I want to answer that? So without, or I guess in a vein to, because I am, some people won't believe this, but I am, I don't, I am very uncomfortable talking about myself. I think I can, right, and that is mixed with a fairly strong self-confidence streak, which is
right,
which is kind of the conflict there. So I don't think there's anything. If I set my mind to it, I don't think there's anything I can't do. Now, I will. I could never be on the Air Force Honor Guard in Washington D.C. because you have to be 6 foot. I'm not 6 foot, right? Like I am not going to be. I'm not going to be an offensive lineman. I'm 5'7" ish, 185 pounds, offensive lineman, not in my future. But you'll never make me quit. And I was never the fastest guy. I was a swimmer, so I was always a lot more comfortable in the water. I don't particularly enjoy running, which is why I make myself do it on a regular basis. But you're never going to make me quit. And if all else fails, I will just, through pure determination and hard-headedness, make my way through an issue and an obstacle. And I think that's, I think after 30 years of a career and a fair amount of introspection, the things that I valued and wanted to do, I'm not one to let obstacles get in my way. So when a medical doctor tells me that I'm not physically qualified, I'm going to prove you wrong. When someone tells me I can't go do something, yeah, man, I'm gonna prove you wrong. Yeah. So I don't I don't think that statement is a mischaracterization in any way, shape, or form. It's you'd probably be hard pressed to find me ever blowing my own horn about it, but I will frequently use myself as an example as, hey, if I can go do these things, if I can go
Right.
do these things as a product of the Texas public education system, as a guy who has had a knee operation or knee injury when he was 10 that had 13 operations, as a guy who's not the biggest, he's not the strongest, he's not the fastest, if I can go do these things, I mean, anybody can. Um, I think Sergeant Major saw or had some kind of insight into what I was capable of probably earlier than I did. And he was, I'll tell you that actually the last conversation I had with him was, I apologized to him because I feel like I let him down because I did not make general officer. I think I could have. It didn't interest me. Being a general officer didn't interest me. And he thought I was probably the kind of person who needed to be a general officer because I didn't want to be one. And so in my last, is actually passing messages back and forth through his daughter. I mean, at that time, it was just a few days before he passed. I don't think he was even capable really of speaking very much. I apologized to him for letting him down, for not having made general officer. And I mean, he was adamant that I didn't let him down. And I mean, I still feel like I did, but his confidence in me and his pushing me to go do things and to not quit and to find a way to where you wanted to be was, I mean, I can't underestimate the impact that had on me.
Yeah. Well, and to maybe remove, I guess, a little bit the barrier of humility.
Yeah.
To anonymize it. And his sentiments there being the nature of the job that he did. Almost people who do this job can do a lot of other things.
Yeah.
Did you find that held up across your buddies and those who came before you and after?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I would tell you that, for all of the naysayers in the Trigon or in the university, I mean, we did not help ourselves by our shenanigans by any stretch of the imagination. But if you look at any group, any one specific population set, if you take back as far as you want to go, and you look at what guys who were on the bonfire committee have achieved, I would argue with you that without really having a lot of empirical data, that we are one of the most successful groups in the university. When you look at doctors, inventors like River, just entrepreneurs, when you look at philanthropists, when you look at military officers, you look at folks who give back to the university. When you look at all of these things that that former red pots and former climbers and former brown pots, and I don't know if I don't know if it continues to extend out to yellow pots and butt pots and everything else, but in the bonfire committee, like the actual membership of the bonfire committee, you'd be hard pressed to find a more successful group. And as the last couple of days, as I've been thinking about, man, what do I want to talk to Dion about? Having talked to a lot of former red pots over the years, the things that the leadership that we learned, the responsibility that we learned, the attention to detail that we learned, the sense of purpose that we learned, the sense of urgency that we learned. There aren't a lot of places where you can, as a student in college, be responsible for finding land, getting insurance, coordinating transportation, coordinating food and water, coordinating emergency services, coordinating security, doing the training, making sure that everybody gets there at the right time, at the right place, with the right equipment, making sure everybody gets back, and then actually taking all of that effort and moving it to a completely different location, and then building something with it, with a relatively unskilled workforce who's doing it out of the goodness of their heart, kindness of their heart, with no compensation. The leadership challenges that presents, of dealing with the university, of dealing with local law enforcement, of dealing with environmentalists who don't necessarily believe the same, or don't support the concept of bonfire like we do, of parents, you name it. The things that we learned in that experience carry over to this day. I think for all of us. Man, we've had politicians, lawyers. I haven't seen the latest. We will have a general officer. I haven't seen the latest promotion lists, but we've had a Thunderbird pilot. We've had all kinds of people do amazing things, and continue to do amazing things. And it's, I think as a community, we remain fairly tight knit. I learned through a lot of my training in special operations that shared suffering builds a sense of community. Right. And we have all suffered lack of sleep, lack of water, lack of food, lots of stress, and we suffer through that together, and that shared. I talked to, Alan Cook, my one of my non-reg buddies, passed away. God rest his soul. But for most of my class, we all still talk on a regular basis. I probably talk to Trent Kelly, Jim McTasney, or Kenton Heinze. I talk to one of them almost every week.
Yeah.
Now, it hasn't always been that way. My job just hasn't always allowed me to do that. But, I talk to guys from my line on a fairly reasonable or fairly frequent level, and it's, man, I think all of us benefit from the things that we learned and came out the back end with. And I don't know. I mean, fish drill team is kind of similar. I guess the Cav is kind of similar, but I speak to Bonfire specifically in that I think we are all better people in the end for having having a dedicating yourself to something larger than yourself, to investing time and effort, not for personal gain, but for the gain of others. And there's a lot to be said for the types of things that we learned out of that. I will never, and I will never regret a day of the experience that I had. Could I have done better academically? Without a doubt. But to an extent, I would tell you that I don't know that I would have done better academically had I not been involved with Bonfire, because I at least had to keep my grades up to keep my pot.
Exactly.
I mean, so there was maybe we should have set that bar a little higher, but man, it was a phenomenal experience. I think the things that I learned in Bonfire, when it when it came to going through assessment and selection in the combat control, and and it was hard. I mean, my indoc class, we started. I think we started with 80, like 86 or 87, and I think 10 or 12 of us finished. And it was, it sucks right now, but man, it's going to end.
Right.
We're going to get through it. This will end at some point, right? It's like, man, it's like push and doing, shift after shift after shift. It's uncomfortable, but it's going to end. Being a junior is going to end. You're going to become a senior. It's going to get better.
Yeah. And did you have the experience that so many talk about, where you become a senior and you go, "Oh, I miss being a junior"?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. It was, man, like you can't, I don't, especially when I was there, we probably didn't know how to categorize it. Right. It was, man, there was an adrenaline, a cortisol dump, like into your system. Like you got up and man, you were on the clock, and I have to raise this much money, and I have to get this much equipment, and I have to go talk to these people. I have to do this. And oh, by the way, I have to go to class. And oh, by the way, I have my core stuff to do. And, at some point I have to eat, and I have to study, and I'm going to need to get some sleep at some point. And man, it's just, it was, like, I'm sure we were all living on adrenaline. But that sense of urgency, that sense of purpose, you still had it as a senior, but man, it was, I guess for one way to describe it, there was a level of comfort with being a senior that you got, because man, you've arrived. There's like, you're a senior. The next thing is being a dead pot. So, man, I'm not sure that I would like to go be a junior Redpot again at this point in my life, but man, I am envious of the guys who do it. I don't know. I mean, from your experience, because your experience is very different than mine.
We had, and that's the great thing about having the different experiences.
Okay, go ask Mama.
that that's the great thing about having the different experiences, is that when the experiences become so different, and then you can come together and go, well, yours was different than mine, but then you find out, okay, so what do we have in common? You realize the important things were in common.
Right.
And when we were starting it, 03 and 04, and I've talked to many folks who at the beginning, who I now consider friends. At the beginning, when we were strangers, they weren't happy about what we were doing, because it was, well, you can't possibly understand. And what are you thinking? But then once it's done, and then they see my sons and my grandsons and my great grandsons, and then they see what they've become, and then they come
Right.
out, now or a few years ago, and they see it, and then they go, oh, this is it. This is the same, and you're learning the same things. And in fact, I learned some things that you didn't learn, but you're learning some things that I don't know if I could have learned.
Right.
That you're not building it in your backyard anymore. Those challenges there. And then the changing, society is changing, and the
Right.
recruitment of A&M is changing, and you're not getting folks that, some of them, at least some of them, have swung an axe before. Very few anymore
Right.
have ever done it, and there's
And
challenges there.
you guys didn't have I mean, we counted on the core,
Yeah,
and you guys didn't get like the core had core push, man, and they were going to be, that was a mandatory event for them.
yeah,
And you may have gotten varying levels of work out of different units, but they were there.
yeah,
And the commandant's office supported it wholeheartedly.
yeah.
Um,
Which was fun for me. I mean, I had the luxury of being a non-reg. I don't know if there could have been a core guy in my position. I had a core buddy, of course, Brigade Woods was core, Chris
mhm.
Sandoval. But in my position, where I did get to interface with, different important people, I had the luxury of being a non-reg, taking the commandant out and showing him the woods, because he said, I'm looking for my men. And I knew what he meant.
Mhm.
So I took him around the woods, and oops, I guess they're not here today, sir. Sorry to have wasted 2 hours of your life. And they're just hiding, as I go and take them places, and there's a green pot radioing ahead, like Dion's going this way now. And there was that, which didn't help, and I remember panhandling on the corner of University in Texas, and people just looking with disdain at, how awful, which now the students have got to keep up with the people that want to help them,
Mhm.
which is outstanding. But it wouldn't it wouldn't be what it is now if it didn't take a lot of effort to get there. Just like your career, it wouldn't be what it is if it didn't take a lot to get there. And the students now understand that they've inherited that effort, and they have to apply their own, and they respect that. And it doesn't just end at my effort or start at my effort. It goes all the way back. There's a reason why those connections are so important.
Yeah.
They're inheriting your effort. They're inheriting effort all the way back to the beginning of Bonfire.
Yeah.
And you, like you say, you almost can't, at the time when you're in it, you can't explain what it is you're learning. You don't even know what you're learning. I mean, you're busy learning what you don't know, and then
Right.
learning how to know it. And so when it's all over, I mean, you spend your whole life trying to look back and go, okay, why do I have this appetite? Where's this coming from? And you can trace it back to Bonfire, and the challenges you had there. And sometimes you learn, the most important thing that you learn is that this too shall pass. Whatever it is, this too shall pass. And a lot of people aren't introduced to that until the worst moment of their life.
Right.
And when you've been in Bonfire leadership, you're introduced to that at a very early age. This too
Yeah.
shall pass. Um, which is a long way of saying, I mean, I can go on for days about the things that I think, you know, I've learned, but that's only what I've learned. And what I've learned is a fraction of what everybody else learned. The most important thing is everybody's learning, and
That's right.
they just keep pushing through.
And, I mean, just it, it was a leadership laboratory, and you had to deal with people who'd never swung an axe before,
Mm-hmm.
to guys, to students who grew up, dryland farming in the Panhandle, to folks who grew up in the Piney Woods, to folks who grew up in South Texas, and all had different levels of experience to draw upon, to people from out of state, to people from different countries. You had to deal with people in the Corps, people not in the Corps. You had to figure out how to deal with all kinds of different people. I mean, there was just so many different things that you had to, you had an opportunity to go, hey, I'm going to go talk to this group of people and I'm going to handle it this way. And you walk out of it going, whoa, that did not go well.
Right.
Next time I talk to them, I'm going to do this. Or you go
Right.
talk to someone and go, hey, I don't understand why I didn't get these people support. And they're like, oh, I do. You did this, and you did this, and you did this. Oh, huh. Okay. Um, you know, um, you just had, I think a lot of, people will, when you give them responsibility, I think a lot of people will respond the right way, and take on that responsibility seriously, and look to, meet the expectations placed upon them. And when we were fundraising or getting equipment or doing, I mean, that was all we knew what we needed to make the project work. And hey, can you blow it off and not do it? You can. And you learn very quickly there's consequences to that.
Yep.
Consequences is, hey man, you may not have a fire. Hey, you may not have enough axe handles. Hey, you may not have enough fuel. You may not have enough trucks or tractors or bulldozers or baling wire, whatever the case may be. And then you start experiencing the third and fourth order effects of those things, and you're like, oh man, yeah, I can't do that. Like, there are people who are counting on me to get these things done. Not only my buddies, but everybody who wants to come participate in Bonfire.
Yep.
And hey, those people deserve the best that I've got to give. And literally their lives may depend on it.
Right. Well, and that whole, you talk about third, fourth order consequences, all these things, and tracing them back, maybe even to fundraising. That's a lot of times that's a good place to trace everything back to. Why are you behind right now? Well, because you had to do extra work, because you ran out of materials, because you didn't fundraise.
Right.
And in fundraising, fundraising has fascinated me ever since I was a kid. That's what my dad always did in his, when he switched from photography to a career in academia, it was fundraising. And he always hated that word. And he always described it as opportunity presentation. You're just presenting an opportunity to people to help. And that's a hard way to do it.
Yeah.
Because, you got to deal with looking somebody in the eye and saying, here's this thing I love and I need your help. And having them go, I don't love it. Or I don't love it the way you do. That doesn't mean they can't. That just means you didn't explain it well enough, but you take it right. Personally. It's very hard.
Or that somebody didn't bring him a picture of the fire from last year to say thank you. Right. They're like, I would love to give you money, but you guys never gave me a picture from last year. It's like,
exactly.
A
common thread.
Yes.
Always that.
Yeah. But, and I think probably every class, almost every person in every class can go, yeah, so there was this one time. I went
Yep.
to this business or this individual donor. Hey, like to talk with you about your donation to Bonfire. Well, it's going to be a short conversation.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
yeah,
And it's in the theme of so many of the things that happen. It's you have to choose to do it the hard way. You have to choose, instead of just going out and working for pennies on the dollar, which you can do, and you can make quota just doing manual labor and recruiting Browns and Chiefs and everybody. But the harder thing to do is to go sit face to face to somebody.
that's right.
But when you do that, you have to explain it in a way. Your pride starts building up this, like, I can't take this anymore. You've got to start explaining this so I stop dealing with getting told no. So that causes you to be able to explain it in a way that helps you understand it better. And it helps you do a better job of doing your job because you've had to put it into words. And all of that to say, I mean, that's just one of the ways, one of the jobs that you learn. I have to choose to do this the hard way. And then when you get to a senior, you realize, oh, there was an easy way. You forgot you were choosing the hard way the whole time. But what you end up learning is to, at least in my experience, is to look at everything that happens, especially the undesirable things. The good things you look at, and you find everybody around you who you can connect with that positive outcome, and you bring their attention to it. This happened because you did this 3 months ago. This happened because you helped somebody else. And then you look at the negative things and you go, I'm going to follow this until I find out where I'm responsible for it.
Right.
If I saw a situation developing and I said, not my job right now, I'm busy, and I walked away from it, well, that eventually turned into this thing. And that reframes your whole life. Find out how everybody else is responsible for the good things, and find out how you are responsible for the ones that aren't. That's huge. That's a big hill to get over.
Yeah.
But like Jim said, and we talked about it with River too, a lot of people spend their whole life trying to find something that puts them back in that situation again.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. After listening to your conversation with River, I sent him a note. It's just like, you know, I understand where you are now, right? And you guys are trying to get your product to a point where, man, it is right, that there's a business case model, that it's now sustainable. But hey, in the back of your head, think about these things, right? Because you are very focused on feeding cattle, right? And that's what you're focused on. But recognize that there's a lot of times and places where what you're making can feed people, right? After a natural disaster,
Yeah.
in a war zone where a non-governmental organization, a nonprofit organization has food that they need, and supplies, medical supplies, water, whatever the case may be, that they need to get into, a conflict zone or someplace where the bridges are all out, or they've had a massive earthquake. And hey, man, this thing can go do that, especially when you start talking about big payloads, right?
Yeah.
And if that thing breaks down, that vehicle breaks down, or that vehicle gets destroyed, there's not a human life attached to that. There's a cost, there's a bottom line attached to that, but there's not a cost to it. That there is a whole host of other things, that applications for that. And hey, you know, right, wrong, or indifferent, a rechargeable electric motor platform ought to be something that you have in the works, because there are going to be places where they're going to say, hey, you can't have a combustion engine. So, for instance, if you want to have a market in Europe for that, because I think there would be a market for that UGV in Europe. And there are countries here that are going to tell you it's got to be an electric platform. Now, you're not talking about necessarily the distances of the 10,000 acre ranch, the 50,000 acre ranch that you might be talking about in Texas, but what you are working on. Don't become so fixated on this one thing that you, to the exception of these other opportunities and possibilities that are out there. I think there's a lot of utility in what he's working on.
Yeah.
As he starts looking at stacking like 4G, 5G, and potentially like a cell repeater, right? Well, now not only are you taking food and water to people who are isolated because of a natural disaster or something, but now you're also bringing comms, which that infrastructure has probably gone out too. So it was just, I was listening to the podcast this morning while I was working out, but it just allows my mind to kind of run free on some things, kind of off the point of what we were talking about. But that's where my mind went to as I was listening to y'all's podcast this morning.
Yeah, and I mean, and when he first reached out to me, I've been doing software for a long time. I started it to sell T-shirts out of Walton Hall, and my buddies did the website for free. But you get tired of asking your friends to do free stuff, and so I started playing with it, and it gave me headaches and stuff, source code, stuff like that. But I did stuff, and then people said, "Hey, that's great. Can we pay you to do it?" And then they told me how much it pays, and good grief, yes. So he calls me with this idea he's got, and I'm like you. I'm instantly like, "Oh my gosh, you can do this, that, and the other thing, and you can soil sample and grounds and conditions and etc."
Oh yeah.
And yeah, and he was just, yeah, I know we can get there, but first, right now, what we're talking about is this, and then I had to tell him, well, I can't help you because I have no idea how to write what you're talking about. But man, he learned some of the hardest stuff to do. But it's that process of looking for something. I found something that's really, really hard, and I have no idea. That's what I'm doing. He's living out that process that so many other people in this experience have done.
Yeah.
You get out of college, you start doing things, and then you realize nothing is hitting as hard as this other thing. And then you find something that shows signs that it can be hard. And you turn that way. You just can't help it.
Yeah, I think that is one of the things that attracted me to pursuing combat control was, I mean, it's hard. It's a physical game without a doubt, right? If you don't have a certain level of physical ability, or at least a certain level of pain threshold, man, it's going to be really difficult. But that ability to suffer through those things, that high level of physical fitness, just allows you intellectually the ability to think through the problem sets that you're dealing with, and hard problem sets. I mean, really, really hard, complex problem sets. I mean, I think at the end of the day, oh man, I ended up with something like 56 months in combat. something. I added it up at one point. It was fairly. It was a lot more than I thought it was once I started adding it up. But and it was none of that was easy. Were easy problem sets. You know, and it's, hey, we're going someplace where we've never been before, and how are we going to do all of these things, and how are we going to make, you know, hey, it's no fail, you have to make comps, and that's a problem set that you have to deal with, and you know, surveying things and controlling airplanes, whether they're dropping things on people or landing. You know, it's hard. It's just hard. It's a hard problem set, regardless of what we're doing. And it's, you know, I think what I found there was a group of people who are very similar to the bonfire committee people that I spent, you know, my college career associating with, and there was a level of expectation of, hey, these are the standards, and you're going to meet the standards, and everybody wanted to be there, and none of us were doing it for the money. You know, it's, I mean, we got paid well enough, but you know, nobody joins the military to be a millionaire. That's not. I guess there's people probably who hit the lottery, but you know, generally you don't come out as a millionaire on the other end. You know, and it was a dedication, a commitment to something bigger than yourself. We weren't doing it for the fanfare and for the laurels of appreciation, you know, and there was something that needed to be done. Our country, something bigger than us, needed someone to go do a really hard job, and that's why we were there. And so I find the two things to be very very similar and very complementary. And I don't know. I find it hard to work out a process where if I hadn't done the things that, learned the things that Bonfire taught me, if I hadn't had to have all of those experiences, if I hadn't had a shared suffering experience, if I hadn't had experienced sleep deprivation and dehydration and, you know, working, you know, 24 hours straight, and then still having to do intellectual activities. I don't know that I would have been successful, at least successful to the level that I was, if I had not had those experiences to draw upon. That, you know, hey, I know it's really bad right now. The sun's going to come up, and it's going to be a new day. And chances are it's not going to suck as bad as it did today. So let's just get to tomorrow. Right. So, and fortuitously, you know, I was a Redpot. We wore red hats, and I went into a career field that had a red beret. So, so I, you know, I had a bunch of hats that, I mean, it was like, it was meant to be.
Perfect. Perfect. You know, you talk about, and I don't know how much you're inclined to mention this, but I'll suggest to anybody, if you want to demure in your not wanting to talk about yourself, which I get, call sign chaos, you're in there twice. You know, Mad Dog, yeah. General Mattis mentions twice, you know, situations where you're, like you talk about, complex problems, lots of variables. doing something that a lot of people can't figure out. So, you know, if anybody wants to know about that, they'll get the book.
Yeah. I keep in touch with General Mattis. He really does not like it when you call him Mad Dog, just so you know. So if you ever run into him, don't call him that.
I'll put that down. Note.
He is like probably second to Sergeant Major.
Really?
In terms of, I just think Sergeant Major, because it was very formative to me.
Right.
That the things Sergeant Major taught me and the things he mentored me on and the things he coached me on, then Mattis had to work with, right? That level of stuff. And then he built on it. I mean, General Mattis is just absolutely amazing. You know, he was the CENTCOM commander, and I would go to Tampa fairly regularly. And he would, hey, come by the office, let's have coffee. Like, and I was a lieutenant colonel, he's a 4-star, right? And I'm like, oh, okay, sir. Okay, so I'd show up at his office and he would serve me coffee. I'm like, hey, sir, I'm pretty sure it's not how this is supposed to happen. Like, and he goes, yeah, my office, my rules. You still drink it black? Yes, sir, I still drink it black. Okay, sit down. I'll get you a black coffee. And he would carve out 30 minutes or an hour out of his day as arguably the busiest combatant commander in the Department of Defense to sit down and, how you doing? What what can I do for you? How's things going? Hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And it was, I'm sitting there just appreciative of the fact that, like, he's still willing to mentor me, and give me advice and be a sounding board. And, I asked him, I'm like, hey, sir, so what, like, we served together for, I don't know, about 4 or 5 months. And then, I mean, we ran into each other after that on a fairly regular basis. But hey, sir, like, why do you still I mean, I'm not a Marine. I'm not, you still give me time and you still invest in me. And he was, it's kind of one of those things that goes back to what you were talking about. When things go right, it's everybody else's work, right? He goes, hey, I was just some Marine 1-star. I wasn't, nobody knew me from Adam. And the things that you and your team did for me, you're responsible for me being here. And I'm thankful. I'm like, ooh, yeah, I'm pretty sure I didn't have a very big role in that. But, I mean, didn't make a lot of news. He got married not too long ago. And, to insight into the kind of guy that he is, like, he sent me, like, I sent him congratulations. And he said, hey, I need some marriage advice. And I'm like, sir, I don't think I figured this thing out yet, but hey, how can I help? And he's like, yeah, shoes on the other foot now. You've been married longer than me. Like, you can coach and mentor me on this thing.
You're ranking.
I mean, just, it was, like, there's a whole story behind the, how that whole thing came together. I'll give you the boiled down version is, I was in. I had just come back from a mission. This is before the shooting war has started in Afghanistan. October, I guess mid October of 01. Somewhere around there, maybe. I don't know if it was. Yeah, it was before the shooting war started. So I came back from. No, it was after the invasion had started. Yeah, it was after the invasion had started. So I came back from a mission, and my commander said, "Hey, like, pack up all your stuff. Go to this location. There's some guy named Mattis. Go link up with him." Okay. To do what? Whatever he needs. Okay. So I pack up all my stuff, planes, trains, and automobiles to get where he was at. Spend 2 days on this base looking for him because I didn't know what rank he was. I didn't know that he was a Marine. I just had a last name. Finally find him. So at this, I was in civilian clothes. I had a pretty good Fu Manchu at the time. And I find his headquarters and I walk in and his operations officer, Clark Lathine, Colonel Lathine, was like, "Hey, can I help you?" And I'm like, "Hey, yes, sir. I'm Captain Flatten." And he's like, "You're in the military?" "Yes, sir. I'm Air Force Special Operations, and here's what I'm looking for General Mattis." And he was like, "For what?" I was like, I don't know, sir, whatever he needs. And so I kind of lay out for him what I think I'm there to do. And he was like, I said, "But hey, sir, I have orders. Like, I am to report to General Mattis." And he goes, "Oh, okay. Like, come with me." So we go to the door of General Mattis's office. He's on the phone, and he kind of sees us, and he finishes up his call, and he's like, "Clark, what do you need?" And he goes, "Hey, sir, I have someone here who needs to talk to you." And he goes, "Yeah, come on in, young man." And that is almost always what he called me, young man. And I said, "Hey, sir, I'm Captain Flatten." And he's like, "Really?" So I show him my ID card, Air Force Special Operations. Well, I look on his desk, and on his desk is a picture of a C-17 landing on a dirt strip. And I said, "Hey, sir, are you looking for that capability?" He says, "As a matter of fact, I am." I said, "Okay, sir. Well, here's the deal. I'm the guy that makes that happen." So what do you mean? I said, "No me, no C-17s landing in the dirt. Have a seat." And we talked for about an hour, and that was it. Like, I was at that point, he was like, "You now work for me," you know, and for the next, I don't know how long it was, until whenever I left. So that was late February, I guess, of 02. Essentially thought he considered me part of his staff. I didn't actually work for him, but you'd be hard pressed not to know that. And man, whatever I said in the things I was responsible, in the things I was an expert in, what I said went.
Yeah.
And it's a lot longer story. There's some really funny parts to it. But I mean, in the end, it was just, I happened to see that Joint Forces Quarterly magazine sitting on his desk with the picture of the C-17 landing in the dirt. And I was like, "Yeah, man, I like shot in the dark. Hey, sir, if you're looking, like, know me, no C-17s."
Yeah.
And he was like, "Okay, well, then you're in." And it was, man, and it was for just a learning opportunity for me after that, like nonstop. Every day was watching him as a leader and learning. And his love, like, they're probably the only thing he loves more in this world than his Marines is his wife.
Yeah.
Because man, there is nothing he wouldn't do for his Marines.
Yeah.
So, you know, I guess to take it back, the things that we learned building Bonfire are the things that I think I directly attribute to the things that made me successful as in special tactics and being being a successful special tactics officer.
And that's powerful stuff. I mean, that point is a lot of what motivated to start having these conversations. That, from my position, looking in on what the students are doing and what their challenges are, sometimes they don't even know what their challenges are. They just keep hitting the wall. Well, I know what's behind that wall. They're just busy pushing against it. And one of the challenges I saw is something that's not actually uncommon across generations. Students now think that they're the only ones to experience it. I used to think that we were the only ones experiencing it. I was talking to Drew Gibson one time, and I said, we're having an issue on the quad where the Trigon is telling people, if you want to amount to something out of the Corps cadets, you should not take leadership in Bonfire. And I thought that was just a unheard of proposition. And Drew said, dude, they've been saying that for decades. They've always said that. And so the students are experiencing that now. And for the benefit of hindsight, I can tell them, hey, this is a good thing. This makes your job, you don't have to find the hard thing now. They're finding it for you. It's easy, and so overcome that. But what you're talking about is so huge to so many students who are looking for a challenge. And I hear a lot, from people who don't find Bonfire till their senior year, and they might have achieved some level of outfit or core leadership. And then they go, what was I wasting my time with? I should have been doing this.
Yeah.
And to make sure that people don't miss those opportunities with like what you're saying, this is going to add meaningfully to the rest of your life. And quite frankly, if it had that impact on you that applied to that situation, then what you did in choosing to do it and choosing to go the hard way actually impacted America and the world. And there's that direct connection there.
Yeah. So, after I went into Afghanistan with General Mattis, we were at Rhino. At what point in the time we were at Rhino, I don't remember, but a Special Forces ODA, Operational Detachment Alpha, came in, and I was walking down to a compound where Mattis and his staff and a bunch of the medical people and a bunch of other people were, and I see this guy walking across, and I'm like, man, I know that guy. Well, I recognize that walk. I don't know who it is, but and they start, somebody yells his name, and they're like, Andy, and I'm like, oh. I get closer. It was Jamie Anderson. He's my grandson. And I'm like, hey, man. And we had just run into each other in Kuwait 6 months before that. And, so, man, I ended up getting a ride with Jamie and his ODA from about, north of Rhino. We did a helicopter movement to where they were linked up with them in the middle of nowhere. I hopped into a Humvee with Jamie, and we rode from middle of nowhere near the Red Desert, up through Lashkar Gah and into Kandahar, and went to Kandahar Airfield. And the next day I went out, and I was clearing buildings with Jamie Anderson and his ODA. and ran into him again in Kuwait right before we invaded Iraq. But here's a guy that, I mean, it's not just that he's a bonfire committee guy. He's my grandson. He's my line grandson.
Right.
And Reggie Harper, who's my great grandson. Reggie and I ended up running into each other a number of times in Iraq and Afghanistan. And it was always good. But I've talked with those guys too, and a number of other people that, hey man, I mean the things that we learned, got us where we were, and yeah, I think like you, I think we probably thought we were running into problems, with the administration or landowners and, all kinds of different people about, problems that nobody ever had to deal with before. And then, yeah, somebody shows up and goes, "Oh man, like I dealt with that 20 years ago."
Yeah.
Like, hey man, you're not special. Like, there's not a lot that's new under the sun.
No. And then conversely, there's so many things that the students are doing now that they're well, this is easier or whatever. And this has been done a million times. And then dads come back and go, "What the hell? Why do you have to do it like this?" And you explain the situation, and dads go, "Oh my gosh." It's generally speaking, you get them flipped. The things that you think are new are not, and vice versa.
Yeah. And, I mean, we didn't have to deal with social media and every phone had a camera and, Twitter and Facebook. We didn't have to deal with any of that stuff.
No.
Man, could those tools have been very useful? Oh yeah, absolutely. But there's also, I mean, there's just some things that we didn't, right? There were problems that were identified that we were able to address without them, going viral.
Right.
And the problem becoming so big that you don't have a chance to engage and solve it at the lowest level before, the university gets involved or somebody gets involved.
You had the benefit of full context. Yeah. And that's the thing for me about all that social media stuff is it is a vacuum of context.
Yes.
How many times have people made decisions based on what fit in a vertical orientation of a phone like this and made their decisions, and then later on, when somebody else from another angle 2 feet away has a perspective, people go, "Oh, that's completely different than what I thought." It's a lot. We didn't have it either. I can't even, and it comes up a lot from people from our generation and before. We would have gotten in so much trouble. No, you wouldn't have. You just wouldn't have had any fun because you wouldn't have done the things. That's it.
Yeah. That's fair.
Now, speaking of fun, and I know you gotta split. It's dinner time by you. I'm waiting for the door of my house to come blowing off the hinges. So speaking of fun, I want to play one game. Because honestly, I can't think of another way to introduce this. So we'll play word association. Okay. And when I say banana,
split. I know where you're going.
Yeah.
I'll leave it at split.
Okay.
It is not someone wearing a banana suit driving a bulldozer around campus.
No, absolutely not. It is absolutely not that. You're right.
Oh man, that is when I come back to College Station next, so I may have a work trip to Austin, like in March. March, maybe March, I think. If I do, I'll tack on it. I'll tack on a day on one end of that trip, and we'll go sit down and have a beer, and I'll tell you a whole bunch of other stories.
Outstanding. I look forward to it, and I thank you for all your time today. Speaking as a dad to a dad,
no
also
worries.
thank your family. Thank your family for cutting out some time with you.
Yeah, you started breaking up again right at the end.
Oh, I just thank you for your time on it, and thank your family. As a father to a father, thank you for your family for sharing their time, your time. Y'all got a busy evening ahead of you, it looks like.
Well, it'll be pretty soon. It'll be bath time, bedtime for them, and then I have to check the moon phase. So deer season in Germany starts 1 May. So I may and it's dark or it's light here till almost 10 o'clock now. So I may grab my rifle, and I haven't gotten a deer yet. We're only hunting bucks right now, and the rut will start here probably in the next 3 weeks or so. But it's ray deer. I mean, they're really small, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But they're fun to hunt. But I appreciate it. I do appreciate the fact that you are doing this. We are getting to the point where, even in my class, man, I lost one of my buddies. There's a lot of stories out there amongst the dead pot community. There's a lot of leadership. There's a lot of great lessons to be learned, great stories to be told, and to capture them. I think it's important because while we in this community may be the only people who listen to it, it's good for us to at least have be cognizant of our history and hear stories from the folks who were actually there when the legends were born, and it's a time and effort investment on your part as well, and so I think there's a lot of us who are really appreciative that you're doing it. So thank you.
Yeah, it's I've used this analogy for many things, but it's a salmon swimming upstream. I don't even know where I'm going. I'm just going there because I feel like I probably should,
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah. So it'll be good, and I'll keep you posted on that. Now I'm gonna hit the stop record button, and it might be a few minutes. Don't turn anything off.